Daddy, who is this strange woman sleeping here? The dark secret of a millionaire single dad. The sunlight broke through the curtains, illuminating a room thick with secrets. A luxurious penthouse overlooking the city, but it was not the view that drew gasps. Laying in the king-sized bed, tangled in satin sheets and shadows, was a woman. Her hair, a wild mane of midnight, framed a face that looked as if it belonged in a painting, smooth and serene, yet mysterious. The little girl stood frozen, wide-eyed, her small hand clutching her stuffed bunny like a lifeline. Daddy, who is this strange woman sleeping here? The question echoed like a thunderclap in the air. The little girl's innocent voice pierced through the fog of sleep, stirring her father from his slumber. Richard, once the charmed prince of high society, gripped the edge of the bed as if he might be thrown off it. His mind raced. Who was she? The air felt thick with uncertainty, a weight sitting on his chest. He had always kept his personal life under the tightest lock until now. The woman stirred slightly but didn't he wake, a soft sigh escaping her lips. In a home filled with polished marble, designer furnishings, and a ghostly silence, her presence felt outlandish. Everything about her screamed chaos amidst Richard's carefully curated world. Why was she here? His heart pounded in time with his daughter's quiet breaths. As he drew in a breath, the familiar smell of roses and something else lingered in the air. Was it danger or desperation? He forced a sheepish grin, hoping to mask his panic. Sweetheart, let us just, maybe give her some space. But the little girl frowned, her brow knitted with confusion, the kind only a child could possess. Suddenly, the front door creaked open. Richard's pulse quickened as his best friend, Mason, stepped inside, looking wide-eyed and disheveled, as if he'd seen a ghost. Mason's mouth dropped open, and his gaze darted from Richard to the bed. What the hell happened here? He spluttered, raising an eyebrow that practically shouted scandal. Richard felt the room closing in on him, shrouded in an invisible fog of doubt and danger. Why had he allowed this soft, enigmatic woman into his life? This one reckless decision could cost him everything. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let us connect. Richard's heart raced as he turned back to the sleeping woman. Who was she really? Why did she have that haunted look, the kind that suggested she was running from something? And just what would happen when she woke up? The tension in the room was palpable, like electricity in the air before a storm. Richard's mind was spinning with questions, but all he knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. As the woman stirred slightly, a frown creased her brow. What would her awakening reveal? Richard's breath quickened as he tried to collect his thoughts. The weight of Mason's gaze felt like a spotlight, shining directly on the chaos unfolding before them. The woman in bed stirred again, her eyelids fluttering, casting fleeting shadows across her porcelain skin. Richard, you need to tell me what's going on, Mason said, his voice sharp, slicing through the tension like a knife. I don't know, Richard stammered, panic rising in his chest. I came home late last night after a dinner meeting. We had a few drinks, and I think you think you what? Brought a stranger home? Mason interrupted, incredulity coloring his voice. Richard gritted his teeth. I didn't plan this. I swear. The woman breathed softly, as if sensing their conversation. His daughter's curious eyes darted between them, confusion knitting her little brow tighter. The reality of this mess hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Suddenly, the woman cracked one eye open, her mouth forming a soft "oh" of surprise as she took in the bright room and the two men standing by the bed. She blinked as if trying to remember where she was, then bolted upright, the satin sheets falling away to reveal the simple, unassuming pajamas she wore. The panic rose like a tidal wave. Richard's heart thundered in his chest. Could she remember anything? Did she know who he was? She turned her gaze towards him, her eyes a stormy sea of confusion and something deeper fear. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with an undercurrent of anxiety. Richard stood frozen, caught in her gaze, unable to articulate the mess he had concocted. I'm Daddy." His daughter's voice sliced through the moment like glass. Her little body moved closer to Richard, as if seeking protection from the unknown. The woman flinched at the sound, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "What is happening?" she demanded, clutching the sheet to her chest like a lifeline. "Where am I?" Richard felt sweat bead on his forehead as he sensed Mason's judgmental stare sharpening. "Let us all just take a breath," Mason suggested, stepping forward, trying to take control of the spiraling situation. "Can you tell us your name?" The woman blinked rapidly, then shook her head, disbelief etched into her features. I don't remember." Richard's heart sank. The silence that followed thickened the air, wrapping around him like a vice. What had happened last night? It was one thing to bring home a stranger, it was another utterly to find someone without memory of how they arrived. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the tension. Richard's pulse raced. He grabbed it quickly, glancing at the screen. It was a message from someone he had hoped to avoid, an old business partner, symbols and hints of something darker lingering within the text. "Don't forget about our deal. She's just the beginning." "What's wrong?" Mason asked, clearly noticing the shift in Richard's demeanor. "It's nothing," Richard lied, forcing the words out like poison. The woman's eyes sharpened as she caught a glimpse of his expression, her pulse quickening in response to the tension. Richard's mind raced. The ramifications of this day could shatter everything he had built. The woman's distress mirrored his own growing dread. She shook her head slightly, breath hitching as if she sensed something more ominous in the background. As if summoned by an unspoken alarm, the doorbell echoed through the penthouse, sharp and insistent. All eyes shifted toward the entrance, panic and uncertainty stiffening the air once again. Who could it be? Was someone coming to take the woman away? Or was it a ghost from his past, chasing Richard down with no hope of escape? "Richard!" Mason warned, eyes darting to the door. With a pounding heart, Richard took a step forward, every instinct screaming at him to prepare for what lay beyond that door. What awaited them on the other side? Richard paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Sweat trickled down his spine as every scenario raced through his mind. Whatever awaited him beyond that door had the potential to unravel everything in an instant. "Stay back," he urged Mason and his daughter, but his voice wavered. He slowly turned the knob, the creak of the door sounding like a gunshot in the tense silence. The door swung open to reveal a tall figure, silhouetted against the harsh light of the hallway. The stranger leaned casually against the doorframe, a slow smirk playing on their lips, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy swirling around Richard. His heart sank. The figure felt like a bad omen. "Got your message, Richard," the stranger said, voice smooth and dripping with sarcasm. "Guess we should chat, huh?" Richard's heart pounded as he stepped back instinctively. "What are you doing here, Dominic?" He kept his eyes locked on the stranger, trying to gauge the motive behind this unexpected visit. He had hoped to bury the past, yet here it was knocking at his door. "Business," Dominic replied, the grin never fading. He pushed himself off the wall and stepped into the room, his eyes flicking to the woman in bed. "I see you've had an interesting night." The woman glanced at Richard, confusion deepening the crease in her brow. "What is going on?" Panic laced her voice. "Stay away from her." Richard snapped, the urgency in his tone rising as he positioned himself protectively in front of her, instinct kicking in. Mason moved slightly, shifting on his feet, eyes darting between Richard and Dominic. "Maybe we should all just take a step back," he suggested, tension evident in his voice. Dominic chuckled darkly, his gaze unwavering. No need to play the hero, Richard. She's just collateral damage in a game you can't afford to lose. Anger and fear collided inside Richard. What do you want? His voice trembled slightly, clinging to the facade of control. I want what you owe me, Dominic replied, taking another casual step forward. We made a deal, remember? A small favor that spiraled into a much bigger problem. In an instant, the room felt like it was closing in on Richard. The shadows from the woman's confusion mixed with Dominic's menacing confidence, creating an almost palpable dread that gnawed at him. He could feel the walls pressing tighter around him, echoing the suffocating realization that his life was teetering on the edge of chaos. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard managed, though a knot twisted in his stomach. He could see Mason's growing anxiety mirrored in the woman's eyes, both seeking answers he did not have. Come on, the clock is ticking, Dominic taunted, his voice playful yet laced with danger. If you want to keep her, you need to remember who you're dealing with. The woman took a deep, shaky breath, glancing between the men. Richard could sense her rising fear, could feel her pulse quickening as if she understood that peril lurked just beyond the door. Why don't you start with the truth, Richard? She interjected, her voice steady but edged with apprehension. What are you hiding from me? Richard's heart dropped. The weight of her gaze felt unbearable. He was caught between two harrowing realities, the stranger in his bed and the old flame of danger that threatened to engulf his unsuspecting family. Before he could think of a response, the phone buzzed again on the nightstand, vibrating aggressively as if trying to send signals through the room, echoing the urgency of his racing thoughts. Richard's fingers brushed against it, but he hesitated. Should he check it, knowing it could lead to a deeper plunge into chaos? Or should he keep the truth locked away for just a little longer? As the silence stretched, taut with tension, Dominic leaned closer. Tick-tock, Richard. You know what happens if you don't play along. Richard felt the room constrict even further. He needed a plan, but time was running out. Something had to give. But what? Richard felt the air shift, thickening with an almost unbearable weight. The woman's question hung in the space between them, ominous and deafening, drawing lines through his carefully curated life. His mind raced. How could everything have spiraled so far so fast? Just wait, he stammered, desperately reaching for words that wouldn't come. The truth ricocheted inside his mind, filled with regret and fear. He felt the inevitable edge of revelation drawing near. Dominic's eyes glittered with amusement, absorbing Richard's turmoil. You see the problem, don't you? She's asking the right questions, and you're too scared to answer. Shut up. Richard's voice was sharper than he intended, slicing through the tension. He hated this feeling cornered and exposed. But the woman, still frozen in disbelief, pressed on. I deserve to know, Richard. Who is this man? What did you do? Richard's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced at Mason, who stood as a silent spectator, unease radiating off him. The walls of the room felt as if they were closing in tighter, every breath becoming more difficult. He shook his head slowly, wanting to push this moment away, to buy them time. Dominic took a step forward, and Richard instinctively backed away, ash-colored vulnerability reflected in his eyes. You really don't want to know, he warned, his tone lower now, hitching tight in his throat. What if I do? She countered, determination rising in her voice, even as apprehension shadowed her features. You've kept secrets. You've buried something deep. What are you afraid of? The truth lingered just out of reach, a specter threatening to unravel the delicately woven fabric of their lives. It's not what I'm afraid of, he finally blurted out, it's what you'll lose. Dominic lounged against the doorframe, folding his arms as if savoring the moment. I can explain everything, if only he'll play along, he teased. Richard, just tell me, she pleaded, a hint of desperation in her voice. Whatever it is, I can handle it. But could she? Richard's heart raced as he stared at her, trying to gauge the depth of her resolve. Did she truly understand the darkness that had come to call? Before he could form a reply, the phone's insistent vibrations surged again, this time spilling onto the floor, its screen lighting up. Richard's eyes shot to it, and a chill raced down his spine. What now? Mason whispered, a note of dread in his voice, drawing Richard's attention back. Dominic's expression shifted, the glee replaced with a flickering curiosity. Looks like someone else wants to join the party. Don't you want to see who it is? Richard felt torn. He wanted to scream, throw Dominic out and end this nightmare right here. But curiosity gnawed at him. What lay on the other end of that call? A lifeline? Or another wrench in the gears? Just take it, the woman urged softly, her compassion slicing through the frenzied as Richard bent, a sharp pain stabbed through him the dark promise of secrets and reckoning. The phone felt heavy in his hand, a ticking time bomb ready to explode. Will it unveil the truth or drag them deeper into chaos? The thought gripped him, leaving a dreadful excitement clawing at his chest. As he swiped to answer, the world around him vanished. All that mattered was the voice on the other end. What would it reveal? Richard pressed the phone to his ear, his pulse racing as he braced for the voice. Hello. He managed to whisper, the sound swallowed by the thick tension in the room. A pause. A static-filled silence that twisted into an eerie anticipation. And then Richard. The tone was unfamiliar, sharp like glass. A woman's voice, but not one he recognized. This is Mia. I have information you need. He felt like he'd been jolted awake from a nightmare only to realize he was still trapped in one. Mia? Who is this? How do you know my listen? She interrupted, urgency dripping from her words. There's no time. You need to get out of there. Suddenly, the voice cut out, replaced by a chilling crackle. Richard squeezed his eyes shut tight, frustration mingling with fear. He could sense the eyes on him, the woman, Dominic, Mason, each looking for answers he couldn't provide. What is it? Mason pleaded, stepping closer, his breath hot against Richard's cheek. Who is she? Dominic chuckled darkly. Someone with a dangerous pattern. Isn't that right, Richard? The mirth in his voice didn't mask the menace underneath. Shut up. Richard spat, turning to Dominic, who leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, enjoying the show. Do you want me to continue? The voice on the other end resumed, trembling but firm. They know you're a target. They're here for you. Richard's stomach twisted. Who? The same people you thought you had buried away, Mia answered, her voice rising with urgency. They know about Emily. You need to leave. Now. A cold sweat broke out over Richard's brow. Emily. The name hit him with the force of a freight train. He had sworn to protect his daughter from every evil, every shadow of his past. No. You don't understand. No, Richard, you don't understand. She interrupted again, panic slicing through the line. This is bigger than you. Trust me, they're coming. You have to take Emily and go. He looked pleadingly at the woman in the room with him, uncertain if he could trust even her. What do I do? He managed, his voice trembling. He could see Mason's face, a mirrored reflection of his own inner chaos. Gather her things, and don't let anyone know, Mia urged. You have to move. Richard's breath quickened. He looked towards the door, where Dominic still stood as if guarding some dark secret. He could sense the danger creeping closer, wrapping around him like smoke. Trust her. The woman urged behind him, taking a step forward, her eyes pleading. Richard. Mia shouted, the urgency escalating. If they find you before she could finish, there was a massive crash outside, the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. The room vibrated with fear. Richard spun to the door just as he heard heavy footsteps thunder down the hallway. No. He shouted instinctively, slamming his body against the door to block whatever was coming. The room felt as if it was closing in even tighter, the weight of dread burrowing into his bones. "What the hell is going on?" Mason yelled, eyes wide, panic spilling out of him. "Richard, get Emily." The woman yelled again, and in that instant, the door began to shake violently, each knock sending waves of terror through him. "What do I do?" Richard's voice was a raw whisper. "Run." He turned, adrenaline surging. He had no power, no plan. Just the instinct to protect his daughter. The door splintered, splashes of wood flying against the wall. Richard knew he had precious seconds left before the storm broke. "Let us go." He shouted at Mason and the woman, risking one last sideways glance before leaping towards the hallway, every beat of his heart thundering in his ears. As he darted down the corridor, Richard heard a voice calling, sharp and angry like a whip. Don't let him escape. Time was slipping away, and with it, the threat of safety. What lay ahead felt like uncertainty wrapped in terror. But something drove him forward, hope tangled in desperation. With every ounce of energy, Richard sprinted into the unknown, desperate to safeguard Emily and unravel the chaos that was closing in fast. What grim secrets awaited him around the next corner? Richard barreled down the hallway, the air charged with an urgency that pounded against his chest. He could hear the footfalls echoing behind him, heavy, menacing. Panic clawed at his throat as he pushed himself, heart racing, fueled by adrenaline alone. "Daddy?" A tiny voice called out, slicing through the chaos like a knife, unmistakably innocent. Richard skidded to a halt, his mind racing. There, just ahead, was Emily, peeking from her room, brown hair tousled, sleep still clinging to her eyes. "Who's that woman?" she asked, pointing at the strange woman who was rushing toward him. "Not now, Emily!" Richard yelled, panic rising, glancing back to see if the danger was gaining on him. He could feel the shadow of fear loom closer. He swept Emily into his arms, feeling her small frame tremble against him. "Mia, she's a friend," he managed to say, wanting to reassure Emily while his own heart thundered in his ears. The woman Richard had seen with him hurried forward, urgency seeping into every movement. "You have to go," she insisted, glancing nervously toward the end of the corridor. "We'll explain everything later. Just trust me." "I don't understand." Emily whimpered, clutching his shirt tighter. Richard swallowed hard. "It's okay. Just trust me." He couldn't explain the things swirling around them, couldn't burden her with the danger threatening to swallow them whole. The instinct to shield her was primal, overtaking any logic. "Richard!" Mason cried from behind, his eyes wide and desperate. "We're running out of time." The sound of footsteps grew louder, pounding like a storm that grew too close, the time for hesitation over. Richard turned and bolted down the hall, Emily secure in his arms, feeling the weight of the world pushing against him. He could see the front door looming. Freedom was so close, yet it also felt like a mirage. Richard could sense the unseen claws reaching for them, waiting to snatch away what little safety existed. As they reached the door, the strange woman pushed it open wide. "We have to hurry," she said breathlessly, glancing back toward the fading sound of footsteps. Richard hesitated for just a moment, fear gripping his insides. "Which way?" he asked, urgency pleading in his voice. "Left," she shouted, and without waiting for more, he dashed into the yard, the chill of the night air hitting him like a slap. He could barely breathe, but there was no time to linger. They sprinted across the lawn, the sound of shouts echoing from behind them. Before them loomed a black SUV, sleek and intimidating, its engine idling like a beast ready to pounce. "Get in," the woman urged, her own fear evident as she opened the door. "Are you crazy?" Mason interjected, fear etched across his face. "We can't trust her." Richard shot him a frantic look. "We don't have a choice." If we don't move now. Before he could finish, the SUV's back door swung open. "Now, Richard," the woman insisted, urgency cracking her voice. A flash of metal gleamed in the darkness, and Richard's heart sank. With his heart racing and adrenaline surging, he squeezed Emily in closer and took a breath. He didn't have time to overthink. He couldn't let fear govern his actions. In that moment, the decision exploded within him: survival over doubt. He hustled Emily into the back seat, quickly sliding in himself. The woman joined them with hurried finesse, slamming the door shut just as shouts met distance from the house. They were inside, but the danger was still lurking outside, like a storm on the horizon, waiting to unleash chaos. Richard looked at the woman, searching her face for answers. "What is happening?" Emily whispered, her innocence an ache in his chest. The woman looked at him, her face severe and tense. "You have to know the truth. They're coming for you, but we can't let them take you away." She leaned close, her voice a whisper of shadows. "I'm your only chance." The engine roared to life, and Richard felt a flutter of hope amidst the chaos, yet it was intertwined with dread. As they tore down the darkened streets, Richard couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. There was no turning back now. But what was the truth she spoke of? Who was hunting him and Emily? The answers loomed just beyond their reach, hanging in the air, thick with uncertainty. What secrets had he buried that were now clawing their way to the surface? The SUV sped through the night, its headlights cutting through the heavy darkness like a knife. Richard clenched his jaw, glancing at Emily, whose wide eyes reflected both confusion and fear. He hated that she had to see him like this, frazzled, a shell of the calm father he aspired to be. "Daddy, who is she?" Emily asked softly, the tremor in her voice piercing his heart. The woman next to him, who had claimed to be their salvation, was looking out the window. Her expression was tense, brows furrowed in concentration. "Her name is Mia," Richard said, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. "She is here to help us." Mia turned her gaze toward him, urgency sparking in her dark eyes. "We need to move fast. They won't stop until they find you." Richard's stomach churned. "Who are they?" But she shook her head, brisk. "No time. I'll explain everything when we're safe." The tension in the vehicle thickened. Richard felt like a powder keg ready to explode, every moment stretching like hours. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of headlights appearing in the distance, chasing them. It ignited the flames of panic in his chest. "We're being followed," he shouted, gripping the edge of his seat. "Stay calm, Richard, I know where to go," Mia replied, turning the wheel sharply to the left, tires screeching against the asphalt. The weariness that accompanied their speed felt surreal, as if they were being chased not just by the unknown, but by demons Richard had long tried to outrun. "Are we gonna be okay?" Emily asked, her tiny voice trembling. Richard forced a smile for her sake. "We'll be fine, honey. Just stick with me." They zipped past streetlights, shadows darting behind as if they were a horror movie unfolding in real life. Richard felt sick to his stomach, replaying the chaos of the night in his mind like a tragic loop, daring to pocket pieces of hope amidst irreversible turmoil. Suddenly, Mia's phone buzzed loudly, slicing through the thick atmosphere like a gunshot. She quickly glanced at the screen. "They're close. I need to divert. Hold on." Before Richard could question, she swerved hard into an alley, the tires fighting for traction on the uneven pavement. The car rattled violently. Richard's heart felt like it would burst. "Why did you take this route?" he shouted, eyes darting out the rear window. "Trust me. This way, they won't be able to follow us, at least not quickly." With every turn, Richard could feel the claws of anxiety gripping tighter. They shot past piles of garbage and flickering streetlights. The rearview mirror showed blurred images of the pursuing vehicle. "It's happening again," he muttered to himself, trying to block memories of the last time his life spiraled into chaos. "There's a diner just up ahead," Mia said, her voice firm against panic. "We can lose them there." As they rounded a corner, the neon sign of the diner flickered in the distance. Richard couldn't ignore the creeping doubt that gnawed at him. Why was this happening? What did he have to do with any of it? They reached the diner, Mia parking in a spot tucked behind the building. The three of them rushed out, minds racing. The harsh fluorescent lights of the diner felt grounding, yet the dread pulsing in Richard's veins wouldn't he let go. Stay close, he warned Emily, who nodded, still holding onto his hand tightly. Once inside, he looked around, scanning the chaotic mix of customers. They looked normal, just weary souls nursing late-night meals. But for Richard, it felt like stepping into the eye of a hurricane. Mia led them to a booth in the far corner. Order something. I need to make a call. Before Richard could process what she'd just said, she ducked into the restroom. What's wrong, Daddy? Emily asked, her little voice barely breaking through his thoughts. Nothing, we're just going to be safe for a moment. His voice trembled. A minute passed, and unease settled in. Where was Mia? Richard's gaze flicked to the door, heart hammering against his ribs. Then he noticed a shadow moving outside. A figure lingered, peering into the diner through the glass. Richard squinted. His heart dropped, knuckles whitening. He turned to Emily, who looked up at him, her blue eyes filled with trust. Daddy? The figure outside stepped into the light, revealing a face he knew all too well. A nightmare he thought was buried deep in the past. Are you ready to explain? Richard thought, dread flooding his veins, but the sight unleashed a storm in his heart, a whisper he hoped to ignore for who had truly been coming for them all along. In that moment, the air thickened with heavy revelation. He knew they were not safe yet. And the nightmare was just beginning. Richard's mind raced as the figure outside pressed closer to the glass. The dim neon light illuminated a face from his past, one that carried scars, memories he tried to bury along with the former life he thought was long gone. Stay down, Emily, he whispered, his voice low and firm. He leaned closer, shielding his daughter with his body while maintaining his focus on the window. The last thing he needed was for her to see him afraid, but the dread washed over him like icy water. Mia returned from the restroom, a look of urgency plastered on her face. What is going on? Richard couldn't tear his eyes from the window. That man. He is here. Mia, do you know him? He hissed under his breath, unsure if the name would even come close to capturing the intensity of the moment. She scanned the diner quickly, her eyes darting to the door. No, but it doesn't matter. We can't get caught here. He is trouble. Richard's heart sank. We can't go out there. He'll see us. Then we wait. Just be quiet. Mia's tone turned steely. She pressed herself against the booth, observing, analyzing the crowd, calculating their next move. Emily, oblivious to the danger, looked up at Richard innocently. Daddy, who is he? Her small hand squeezed his tightly, grounding him, even as the weight of fear tugged at his core. Richard swallowed hard. He is someone who shouldn't be here. Why? She pressed. He felt the lump in his throat grow, the truth hovering like a phantom. Because he is not your friend, he managed to say, trying to shield her from the reality he knew was crashing down around them. Seconds stretched like elastic, each tick of the clock painfully loud against the silence of the diner. Richard noticed the other patrons staring, curiosity morphing into unease as they took in the odd trio in the back, whispers flickering through the room like a fire. He is leaving. Richard spotted the man backing away from the glass, his expression painted with frustration. The figure disappeared into the shadowy night, but Richard could still feel his presence lingering, a reminder of old demons pulling at his sanity. Are we safe? Emily asked, voice trembling slightly. Mia clenched her jaw. Not yet. We have to move. Now. Richard's pulse quickened, and he felt a heaviness settle deep in his gut. Where to? There's a back exit. It'll lead us to the parking lot behind the diner. We can get the SUV. And the door swung open abruptly, and the tension snapped like a taut wire. A man strode in, the same figure Richard had seen outside. This time, he didn't peer through the glass, he was in their sanctuary, eyes scanning the room, settling on their booth with grim determination. Richard. The tone was thick with hostility, making the hairs on Richard's arms stand on end. He couldn't think, he couldn't breathe. Run! Mia suddenly shouted, breaking the stifling silence as she vaulted over the table. Richard grabbed Emily's hand and yanked her up, adrenaline propelling them toward the back. He felt the world tilt, a tilt that could send them crashing. The terror in Emily's eyes mirrored his own as they dashed toward the restroom door. Go! Go! He urged, his heart hammering against his ribs. Mia was already ahead, pushing through the swinging door. Richard followed, dragging Emily behind him. But as they emerged into the back alley, Richard's dreams of safety turned into a surreal nightmare. The SUV was just a few yards away, but the weight of danger felt tangible. The oil-streaked ground seemed to spit at him as he dashed forward. Then, the shout broke through the night like shattering glass, "You can't run from me." Richard turned, his eyes wide in horror. He saw the man emerging from the diner, rage radiating off him like heat from a flame. "Daddy!" Emily cried, fear pouring from her every word. That he looked back at the child he promised to protect, knowing that there was no easy way out here. The stakes had risen dangerously high. "Get in the car. Now!" he barked. As he pushed her into the back seat, dread clawed at his spine. Richard reached the driver's side just in time to hear footsteps pounding behind him. He had to move, but something inside him screamed that this was just the beginning of something much more sinister. He turned the key in the ignition, heart racing faster than the engine's roar. But even as the car leapt forward, he felt uncertain. A choice hung in the air between safety and darkness, and in the rearview mirror, the face that haunted him loomed ever closer. What was the next move his past would force upon him? The growl of the engine filled the confined space of the SUV, an angry beast clawing to break free into the night. Richard's hands trembled on the wheel as he glanced back at Emily, who was scrunched down, peeking through the seat. The world behind them was a blur of shadows and disease, darkness brewing like thunderclouds, waiting to unleash something terrible. "Daddy, is he coming?" Her voice, small and fragile, cut through the chaos in his mind. Richard swallowed hard, his throat dry. I don't know. But we have to go." He turned the wheel sharply, heading out of the alley, desperately wishing the rearview mirror didn't reveal the gathering storm. He stole another glance backward as he turned onto the street. The figure was still there, gaining momentum like a bad memory rushing back, arms flailing in the darkness that surrounded him. This wasn't just a shadow from his past. They were now entangled in a game with real stakes. "Mia!" Richard shouted, anxiety making his voice rise. "We can't let him catch us." She crouched in the passenger seat, eyes scanning the area like radar. "Head for the freeway. We'll figure it out once we're gone." Richard pressed the accelerator. The SUV surged forward, tires squealing in protest as they left the diner's vicinity behind. The rhythmic thump of his heart pounded in his ears, merging with the roars of the engine. "Who was that guy?" Mia's voice was taut, thick with urgency. Richard's fingers flexed against the wheel. He hated being put on the spot, but there were shifting shadows he needed to illuminate. He is someone from my past. Someone I left behind." "Left behind?" "Richard, it sounds like you didn't just leave, you ran." The accusation was as sharp as a knife. "What does it matter?" He snapped, pain coursing through him. "We need to think of Emily." The girl's silent observance was a weight in the air. He was supposed to protect her. Once upon a time, he had all the answers. Now, everything was spiraling, each new revelation laying waste to whatever sense of stability he had fought to maintain. Richard glanced in the rearview mirror, dread curling in his stomach like a noose. The figure was still pursuing them, relentless in passion, a predator closing in on its prey. He was close enough that Richard could almost make out the features of the man, twisted in fury, a ghost of wrath itself. Then, the world shifted. A sudden blinding light appeared behind them, cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hellfire. "Oh no!" Mia yelled, her expression morphing into panic. "He's got headlights, he's coming. Hold on." Richard slammed the brakes. The tires screeched as he jerked the SUV to the side. The force sent both Emily and Mia lurching towards the door, fear gripping them tighter than any seatbelt that and the cacophony of squealing tires and the thump of his heart. Richard's mind raced. He was caught in the crosshairs of the past, with nowhere to run, every second counting down like a Grenades timer. "Where do we go?" Mia's voice broke through the storm inside him, urging him to act. Instead of responding, Richard shifted gears, jolting the vehicle down a sparsely lit street. Trees loomed ominously on either side, arching like skeletal fingers reaching for them. He felt sheer panic claw its way back up his throat, and right then, he knew running would not keep them safe. He had to confront the demon lurking just behind them. Suddenly, the SUV jolted as something hit the back. A loud bang reverberated through the frame. "Daddy!" Emily squealed, her voice filled with terror. Richard's heart raced as he turned to face the darkness behind. The figure was right there, bearing down on them, rage palpable in the air like gasoline. "Stay down, both of you!" he shouted, gripping the wheel tightly. But before he could plan their next move, a crackling voice erupted from the radio, cutting through the chaotic noise like a bolt of lightning. "Richard! You need to stop. This is bigger than you think." The warning hung in the air, shocking him into stunned silence. Who are you?" Richard stammered, disbelief and anger fighting. "For supremacy. Mia's life is in danger. Trust me." With the figures racing towards them and the weight of unknown peril thickening around them, Richard realized he had to make a choice, and fast. What the hell was happening? Would he trust a voice from the ether, and was it truly a warning or a trap waiting to ensnare them all? In that moment, the weight of choice hung heavily in the air. Richard's pulse thundered in his ears as he gripped the wheel tighter. Emily's small fingers clutched at his arm, her innocent fear a deep knife through his heart. He turned to meet Mia's pleading gaze, as if trying to find direction in the turmoil swirling inside him. "Richard, we have to make a decision," she urged, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. The darkness creeping closer felt alive, a living thing determined to snuff out their light. "Should we stop?" he said, his voice breaking on the edge of desperation. The threat looming behind them flashed through his mind, old demons clinging to the night, drawing closer, breath on their necks. Mia shook her head defiantly, her expression resolute. "If we stop, we won't finish what we've started. We have to fight. But we need a plan." Richard closed his eyes for a brief second, wrestling with the heaviness in his chest. Would running lead them to a dead end, or was it their only escape? But the sound of screeching tires and the reckless pursuit behind reminded him of one critical truth: there was no safety in running alone. They had to confront whatever was chasing them. "Okay, we'll confront him. Just keep Emily down," Richard said, his voice filled with hard determination. He felt like a fortress against the tide of darkness. "Mia, I need you to help me. Get ready." The SUV sped down the dimly lit road, trees flashing by in shadows. Richard turned sharply onto a gravel path that led to an old, abandoned warehouse he recalled from his younger days, a safe haven back when everything had seemed different, before secrets had festered under the surface like a shared sin. "Why are we going here?" Mia asked, her brow knitted. "This place could easily be a trap." "Because I know it," he replied, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "This is where we face this together. No more running, just truth." Emily looked up, her face pale but with trust brimming in those big, innocent eyes. "Will we be okay, Daddy?" Richard felt that twisted knot in his chest again, but he forced a smile. "We will, sweetheart. Just stay with me." As they arrived, Richard parked the SUV behind some rusty old crates, the shadows swallowing them whole. He exhaled, preparing for what was to come. "Lock the doors," he said firmly, and Emily scrambled to obey. Then the three of them sat in the dim silence, hearts hammering. Any moment, he expected the darkness to break open with the rage that hunted them. They didn't have to wait long. Footsteps echoed across the gravel outside. Richard's chest tightened as they approached. He turned to Mia, who nodded, eyes fierce with determination. It was time to stand their ground. Richard. The voice called out, thick with mistrust. You think this is a game? You think you can hide? Show yourself. Richard shouted, his pulse roaring in his ears. The door to the SUV was rattled as heavy fists slammed against it. The man stepped into the glow of their headlights, a silhouette of fury and menace. Richard's heart dropped, a familiar face cloaked in shadows. Samuel, he breathed, recognition crashing over him like a wave. Memories of betrayal and unfinished business rushed in, threatening to pull him under. Richard, you're still playing hero? You always were a fool. You should have left everything in the past. No. Richard snapped, fueling every ounce of anger. You don't get to dictate my life. I'll protect my family. Samuel's laugh echoed through the night, a hollow sound that crawled under Richard's skin. Do you really think you can shield her? The more you fight, the more danger you invite. Mia stood beside Richard, unwavering. We're done running from chaos. It's time to face the truth. You can't control everything, Samuel. Richard's breath hitched, he felt lighter somehow, the truth kicking free of its shackles. This was about more than protection, it was about standing in his power. Before he could think, Richard swung open the car door. The cold air whipped against him, the taste of courage igniting his veins. You don't scare me anymore. Samuel stepped back, taken aback by his defiance. But the menace still simmered beneath the surface, the ugly remnants of betrayal lurking just out of sight. They stood there, two men caught in the unrelenting grip of their pasts, yet one of them held the heart of a family, a heart they would not let be extinguished. We're not backing down, Richard declared, bringing Emily's hand into the light, where it glimmered with innocence and promise. I will do anything to protect my daughter. That's what I was hoping, Samuel replied, his smile curling with malice. Because the game is just beginning. Before he could react, the scene erupted. A sharp burst of adrenaline flooded through Richard's veins as Samuel lunged forward. Daddy! The world blurred. Time paused. Richard instinctively pushed Emily behind him, his entire being fueling a resolve he didn't know he had. He had fought for this moment, for all the days spent living in shadows, and now, he would not falter. As chaos unfolded, a mixture of fear and defiance flooded through him. No longer were they victims running from darkness, they were warriors ready to confront whatever shadows awaited them, and whatever came next. He had one weapon, unwavering love for his daughter. In the clutches of that unyielding fight, Richard drew strength from the depths of his heart. With his family by his side, nothing could shatter their bond, not even the most menacing of pasts. If you've made it this far into the thrilling conclusion of Richard's journey, now is your chance to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow this amazing community. And we want to hear from you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this conclusion. What do you think Richard will face next? Your thoughts are what keep our stories alive. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this breathtaking ending. Your support makes all the difference. Let us stick together and keep this epic storytelling journey alive.